First things first, make sure it's not a door adjustment issue. If your door is sagging due to worn out hinges, you need to take care of that first. If you have to lift up on the rear of the door to close it, if it drops down when you open it, or if the door gaps on the bottom don't look even, you have a hinge problem and it's not a door glass problem. You'll need to remove the door card so you can adjust the glass. The video information for that process is in the description below. Here are the actual shop manual instructions from GM. They tell you what to adjust, but not how. Let's talk about where these are at first. Glass guide stops. There's 2 stops. There's one in the front and one in the back. Anti-rattle cushions. These are on the top of the door and it's just a pad. Regulator bolts at the top of the door. 2 bolts right in the center at the top. Saddle to glass. These are the bolts holding the glass to the regulator. Now, what does each of these parts do? Glass stops. There's one in the front and one in the rear, and both move up and down. The front one is just a single bolt. The rear one has 2 bolts. Moving these up or down adjusts the window height. Anti-rattle cushions. The name is self-explanatory what these things are. They really aren't for adjustment, but you need to loosen them if you're going to mess around with the tilt of the window. Saddle to glass. This is how the glass is attached to the regulator. There are 3 bolts that are inside of the door attaching the glass to the regulator. This is how you adjust the forward and rear movement of the glass. There are 2 bolts on the rear. The top bolt can be reached from the outside, but you have to go to the inside of the door to reach the lower one. The forward bolt is in the square hole in the door, and it can be reached from outside. Regulator bolts at the top. The 2 bolts on the top hold the regulator in place. There's also 2 bolts on the bottom. And there's some minor tilt adjustment that you can make by loosening the top 2 bolts. The main tilt adjustment is done with the rear glass guide. Rear glass guide / stop. This part does 2 things. It's the rear door stop, and we talked about that already. And it's the part that adjusts most of the tilt. The window needs to be all the way up before you adjust the tilt. You have to loosen the nut on the inside of the door, and it's on the side of the window guide. Once it's loose, you can adjust the tilt of the window. Make sure the anti-rattle cushions are loose, and you pull back on the rubber seal near the rear of the door if you're having a hard time making the window move. This is what it looks like removed from the door. It's a compound hinge, and it slides in the middle under the bolt and along the top. So where do you want your glass to be? This is where my glass was before I adjusted it, and what I needed to do was move it back a little bit and lift it up a little bit higher in just the front. So I adjusted the front stop up just a little bit, and I loosened the glass to regulator bolts on the inside to move the glass backwards a little bit. It's a good idea to mark where your bolts were at when you started. That way you can keep track of how much adjustment you are making. This is how it looked after. Notice no more gap in the window.